200 miles per hour. Something that was only ever achieved by the latest and greatest supercars back in the day. But now things are a little bit different. Now we have so many performance cars that are totally capable of doing this, and the notion of getting a car that does 200 miles per hour has become easier and easier. So today we're going to look at the 6 cheapest cars I could find that'll do 200 miles per hour. Before we get into it, I just want to say all these were found on Auto Tempest, and some of these do have electronic limiters, but they are known to be able to hit 200 miles per hour. So enough dawdling, let's get right into it. Starting off with the most expensive car on the list, and that is the 2017 Camaro ZL1. This was the ZL1 for the 6th generation of Camaro. It used a supercharged 6.2 liter V8 like the previous ZL1, but unlike that one that made 580 horsepower, this one made 650, making the ZL1 an obtainable threat that if you wanted to, you could get way more power out of very, very easily. And whilst having an optional 10-speed automatic or 6-speed manual, a usable trunk, 4 seats, and a GM warranty, this thing would actually crack 200 miles per hour, whilst also handling well and still being a threat on the racetrack. And right now, these things start at around $40,000. Which I'm going to refrain from saying it for every single car on the list, but that is an incredible bang for the buck. Next up in 5th place, the 2013 Shelby GT500. It's fitting these two are back to back because the GT500 and the ZL1 have always been strong competition. But the 2013 GT500 used a pretty special engine because Ford only used it in these cars for 2 years, and that was a supercharged 5.8 liter V8. It made 662 horsepower going to a live rear axle and steel brakes. These things were a little bit sketchy, but if you could stomach all that and make it work, these things were real fast. Doing 60 in about 3.5 seconds, doing a quarter mile in the low 11s, and of course, cracking 200 miles per hour. This was always kind of the pinnacle of what the Shelby GT500 could be while still using a solid rear axle. Despite still being a smidge sketchy, these things were pretty well sorted. It just couldn't really do that much more without going to an IRS, which we got in 2020. And with that much power and its devilishly good looks, these things start at $38,000. And to be honest, of everything on the list, I'd probably get way more excited over one of these than really anything else. In 4th place, the Tesla Model S Plaid. Yes, you can't do a really fast, cheap car list without mentioning the Model S Plaid, I know. But frankly, it's for pretty good reason. Despite what a lot of people do say about Tesla, these things came out with around 1,000 horsepower. It would do 60 in under 2 seconds, it would do a quarter mile in this, and would crack 200 miles per hour. I believe when they first came out, they were limited to 160, but they got some upgrades, they've got some new downloads, I guess, and they'll now actually do 200. It isn't the only electric car that'll do 200 miles per hour, but it is the cheapest electric car that'll do 200 miles per hour. And the beauty of it at this point is you're buying somebody else's depreciation. They've went down over $100,000 since they first came out, and they're now going for around $37,000, which that is a lot of car for very not much money. Which everything is, yeah, I get it, but like this thing makes at least 350 more horsepower than the next car on the list. Next most powerful car on the list. But anyway, in 3rd place, the Dodge Charger Hellcat. Much like the Model S Plaid, it's hard to make a cheap performance car list without mentioning one of the Hellcats. As we all know, these things have that incredible 6.2 liter supercharged Hellcat V8 that makes 707 horsepower. Does incredible burnouts and is loved by one of the trashiest groups on the internet. In regards to muscle cars, this may be one of the best ever built. Because you may feel inclined to argue with me how a 69 Charger is better, but this will smoke it in every single way, do better burnouts, and well, still looks great. And if you're asking why the Charger, not the Challenger, top speed wise, the Charger is always a little bit faster than the Challenger, and the Chargers are cheaper than the Challengers. And the Hellcat Charger starts at $35,000. In 2nd place, coming from England, the Bentley Continental GT Speed. So the Continental GT Speeds always use that awesome twin turbo 6 liter W12. They weighed tons. I think they were like 5,500 pounds or something. But once you got moving, these things were fast. And in addition to it being fast, it was also well built. It had the nice interior. It was all well put together. And like everything else, you're buying someone else's depreciation. It's despite they're well built, if you keep them maintained well, they're not too expensive to actually keep running. but when they do need things, they are very expensive to keep running. Which is why the Bentley Continental GT Speed now starts at $28,000. And before we get to the number one car, I'm looking at cars that do 200 miles per hour. So a lot of the other Bentley Continental GTs didn't count, but you can get Continental GTs for way less than this. Like, they start in the teens right now. It's amazing. But onto the first one, a car that we have referenced in other cheap car videos, and that is the V10 BMW M5. I'm not amazing with my BMW chassis names, but the V10 M5 was kind of this really modern step forward for the M5. Every previous M5 kind of looked like an evolution of the one prior to that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when they came back out in 2006 with this body style, it just seemed like an all-new car. And in addition to that, they got that 5-liter V10 that made 500 horsepower, which is fitted to a sickeningly unreliable 7-speed automatic, or in the M5, a 6-speed manual. There's been faster M5s since then, there's been more reliable M5s since then, but this is one of the just generally coolest M5s ever, in my opinion, and you get to walk away saying you have a V10 in a car that starts at $13,000. That's likely on par to a Mitsubishi Mirage with options when it first came out. And despite the Mirage will actually, work properly every single day, I'm going to risk it with the BMW every single day. So those are the 6 cheapest cars that'll do 200 miles per hour. And as always, I want to know, what do you think? Is there anything on the list that surprised you towards how cheap it's getting? And which one would you buy first? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe, enjoy what you've seen. I tend to post a couple times a week, and I'll see you later.